remember
I
actually
think it was
how
probably
we found
about a
out.
week later when they identified the body. We had worked it out by that point anyway.
Yeah, I think most people knew quite quickly.
Sophie Lionnet was a young woman from Troyes, a quiet town in France.
Sorts of things. So the background to the murder really goes back a long, long way, well before they even met Sophie Lionnet.
She was gentle, shy, and known by her friends as someone who cared deeply about others. Life in Troyes was simple, but Sophie often dreamed of more. She wanted to travel, to work, and to help her family by earning money. Growing up, she was close to her mother and stepfather, who described her as innocent and trusting. Sophie loved children and often spoke about becoming a nanny. This dream was not just about work, it was her way of building a better life. She believed caring for children would bring her happiness and give her stability. At home, she did not have many opportunities. Like many young people in small towns, she hoped moving abroad could change her future. London seemed exciting and full of possibilities. Families there often needed nannies, and Sophie thought she could build a safe career. When an opportunity came to work for a French couple living in London, she felt it was a chance to begin again. Sophie's decision was not easy. She would leave behind her family, her friends, and the only life she had ever known. But her heart was full of hope. She wanted to prove that she could be independent. She wanted to make her family proud. At this point, Sophie could never imagine that her kindness and trust would place her in the path of danger. Dream of a better future. When Sophie accepted the offer to work in London, she carried with her simple dreams. She did not chase wealth or fame. She only wanted a safe job, a chance to learn English, and to send money back to her family. Sophie thought this move would open doors for her future. She was only 20, at an age where life feels full of possibilities. Friends remember her speaking with excitement about living in a big city, meeting new people, and gaining experiences that she could never have in her small hometown. Her family trusted her decision. They knew she was responsible and kind, someone who loved children and would dedicate herself to the role of a nanny. For Sophie, this was more than a job. It was a step toward independence and adulthood. She imagined building a life where she could one day have her own home, perhaps even start her own family. London represented freedom, growth, and opportunity. But what Sophie did not know was that her dream would not match reality. Instead of a safe place, she was walking into a house filled with control, manipulation, and cruelty. Yet in those first days, she remained hopeful, believing she had made the right choice. With her soft nature and trusting heart, she gave herself fully to her new life, not realizing the shadows that waited behind the closed doors of her employer's home. Meeting Sabrina and Ouissem. When Sophie arrived in London, she stepped into the lives of Sabrina Kouider and Ouissem Medouni. On the surface, they looked like a successful French couple making a life in England. Sabrina had once worked as a stylist and even claimed to have links with celebrities. Ouissem seemed quieter, a man who followed her lead. To Sophie, they appeared like people she could trust. They spoke her language, promised her a job, and welcomed her into their home. At first, Sophie believed she had found a good position. She was told she would care for the couple's children, something she felt confident about. But slowly, the mask began to slip. Sabrina was not just demanding, she was controlling. She liked to remind Sophie of her authority, and her mood often changed without warning. Ouissem played along, supporting Sabrina's harsh behavior rather than calming it. For Sophie, this was confusing. She wanted to please them, to do her work well, and to live peacefully in their home. She trusted easily, and she believed patience and kindness would make things better. Instead, she found herself trapped in a situation where her gentle nature was taken advantage of. What seemed like the start of a bright journey was turning into something darker. Though Sophie still hoped she could manage, she had no idea how dangerous these two people would become. Life inside the couple's home, living with Sabrina Kouider and Ouissem Medouni, quickly became a daily struggle for Sophie. What was supposed to be a safe job turned into isolation and constant pressure. Inside their home, Sophie had little freedom. Sabrina's voice often filled the rooms with harsh words, scolding Sophie for the smallest mistakes. Meals were limited, and Sophie grew weaker as she was denied proper food and care. Instead of being treated as a valued nanny, she was treated as if she had no rights. The children in the house adored Sophie, and she cared for them with love, but even this joy was overshadowed by the toxic environment created by the couple. Sabrina's jealousy and suspicion dominated the home. She accused Sophie of things she never did, filling the air with threats and endless demands. Ouissem stood silently, rarely defending Sophie, choosing instead to obey Sabrina's cruelty. Sophie rarely spoke to anyone outside. Her phone calls to her family became shorter, and she no longer shared her feelings openly. Fear silenced her. What began as a hopeful move to London was now a lonely life behind closed doors. Sophie was trapped in a house that should have been a workplace, but instead became a prison. Her kind spirit and quiet patience made her endure it, but each day the weight grew heavier. She was slowly losing the freedom she had once dreamed of finding. Lies, control, and fear. As time passed, the couple's true nature became clear. Sabrina Kouider was consumed by jealousy and wild ideas. She spread lies, accusing Sophie of secretly working against her, of helping an ex-partner she believed was spying on her. None of this was true, but Sabrina convinced herself and Ouissem Medouni that Sophie was part of some imagined plot. These false beliefs turned into constant interrogations. Sophie was questioned, pressured, and sometimes forced to confess to things she had never done, only to stop the endless harassment. The control grew worse. Sabrina cut Sophie off from her family and friends, watching her closely and limiting her contact with the outside world. Fear became Sophie's daily companion. She was too kind and too trusting to fight back. She hoped that obedience would calm the storm, but it never did. Every day brought new accusations and new punishments. Ouissem, instead of protecting Sophie, gave in to Sabrina's control. Together, they built a world of lies that left Sophie defenseless. She was trapped in a cycle of fear, where truth no longer mattered. The home had turned into a place of constant pressure, and Sophie's voice grew weaker. She was surrounded by cruelty, unable to escape, and still holding on to the hope that somehow things might change. But deep inside, she must have felt that her dream of a better life was slipping away forever. Sophie's silent suffering behind the walls of Sabrina Kouider and Ouissem Medouni's home. Sophie Lionnet suffered in silence. Her once bright spirit was dimmed by fear and exhaustion. She was isolated from the world outside, with no real chance to ask for help. Calls to her family grew rare, and when she did speak, she hid the truth, never wanting to worry them. Her silence was not weakness, it was survival. She endured the constant control, believing that patience might ease her situation. But the suffering was real. Sophie was underfed, overworked, and emotionally drained. Her health began to decline, and neighbors noticed her thin frame and sad eyes. Some even tried to speak to her, but Sophie always answered softly, never revealing the full truth. She carried her pain quietly, holding it inside because she was too frightened of the consequences if she spoke out. The home that should have offered safety became a place of torment. Every day, she lived under the weight of suspicion and cruelty. Her kind nature, the very quality that made her a loving nanny, became the reason she stayed silent. She trusted too much, forgave too easily, and hoped things would get better. But instead, her silence allowed the abuse to continue. Sophie's suffering was hidden in plain sight, until the night when her fate could no longer be ignored. The night of the fire on September 20, 2017, the hidden torment Sophie Lionnet endured came to its tragic end. Neighbors in the quiet London neighborhood noticed smoke rising from the garden of Sabrina Kouider and Ouissem Medouni's home. At first, it seemed like an ordinary fire, but the smell and the heavy smoke soon raised suspicion. When police arrived, they discovered something horrifying. The couple had set fire to Sophie's body, hoping to destroy evidence of their crime. For days leading up to this night, Sophie had been subjected to harsh treatment, endless questioning, and cruel control. By then, her strength was gone, her spirit broken. Instead of helping her, the couple decided to cover their actions with a fire. They believed they could erase her existence, but the truth could not be hidden. Neighbors were shocked. They had seen Sophie's quiet presence, her fragile figure, and her soft smile, never imagining the pain she carried behind closed doors. The discovery of the burning remains left the community horrified and grieving. Sophie's dream of building a better life in London had ended in unthinkable cruelty. The night of the fire did not just reveal a crime, it revealed the depth of betrayal and inhumanity she had faced. From that moment, the case would uncover the lies and expose the evil that destroyed an innocent life. Justice for Sophie after the fire. The truth of Sophie Lionnet's suffering began to unfold. The investigation revealed months of abuse, control, and cruel treatment at the hands of Sabrina Kouider and Ouissem Medouni. The couple tried to excuse their actions with lies, claiming they believed Sophie was part of some imagined plot. But the court saw through their stories. Evidence showed the reality. Sophie was an innocent young woman who had trusted them, only to be betrayed in the worst way. During the trial, her family sat in grief, listening to the painful details of how their daughter's life had been taken. They described Sophie as gentle, kind, and full of dreams. The jury heard how she was isolated, starved, and manipulated until she could no longer fight back. In 2018, both Sabrina and Ouissem were found guilty of murder. The judge condemned their actions as cruel and heartless, sentencing them to life in prison. Justice finally spoke for Sophie, even though nothing could bring her back. Her story became a reminder of how trust can be exploited, how lies can destroy, and how important it is to protect the vulnerable. For her family, the verdict brought some comfort, knowing that the people who stole her future would never walk free again. Sophie Lionnet's voice was silenced, but the world now remembers her name with compassion and sorrow.